Look out. I took a ride with a good music. I went down, baby, you can tell. I took a ride with a good music. How does the pretty music affect you? I'm Theron Ramacharaka, and this video has no script. In fact, I just thought of making this video about 2 minutes ago. Therefore, I'm not sure what I'm going to say, but it has to do with the effects of sound. Music is sound. And I'm asking the question, how does it affect you? It has been suggested often, and not merely suggested, not exclusively suggested, but often also rather well affirmed, that, let's say, for example, rock and roll was contrived by the ruling elites of the world in order to corrupt youth. Now, corruption of the youth is a serious offense. And, I have elsewhere stated in my channel here, my YouTube channel, that no offense, in my opinion, is beyond no offense whatsoever at any level of application of the word offense is beyond the daily activities of the ruling elite. Suggested that corruption of the youth was the initial aim and continued in general, the continued aim and purpose of rock and roll not just rock and roll, but its derivative forms. And, if we're going to follow this trend of thought, and we kind of have a feeling for the verity of it, the truth of it, or just a feeling about this that corresponds with what I'm saying here, we can see the evolution of the thing from the inception of rock and roll up to the present day. That this purpose is taking a direction of fulfillment, or it's evolving in its actualization, in its manifestation, through the development and through the evolvement of the history of rock and roll. The new sub-genres that have evolved out, into death metal and so forth. All right. By way of this all happening, by way of, first, the main formula, the major overriding formula, the formula would be, for carrying out this purpose, would be to entrance people with the rhythms and the beats, primarily, and then slip in the message. But there's a lot more to it than that. There's more involved, but that would be the basic raw formula. It has been indicated by people like Little Richard, I think, that rock and roll, the main beat of it, the rhythm involved, is closely related to voodoo rhythms. Now, we would take it, I think it is a generally accepted thing that voodoo is, there's no, if any, very little light side to it, or right-hand path to it. That it is, in nearly its entirety, a form of black magic. Acknowledging that there may be some voodoo doctors or voodoo practitioners who have used their skills and their knowledge for constructive ends. All right. Non-selfish ends. Granted, it's possible. All right, but does this mean then that all rock and roll, the basic structure of rock and roll, or what makes something rock and roll in its pure form, demonic? Well, I have played electric bass for a long time in my life, and I have fought very deeply into what I'm doing when I do it, into the ideology behind it, and what it is that I'm creating, how it works. I've always been very into the psychological side of bass lines, bass tones, the tone, the timbre of the sound. I was what we call in the music industry a tone freak. Very, very interested in the exact sound of the thing, the tone. Most electric basses I don't like the sound of. Most amplification systems I don't really like the result. I was always quite specific exactly what tone I was after and what effect different tones have on people at a psychic level, at all levels, and what the effects are on a person. Sequences of notes, the little subtle nuances of how they are played. I always considered all of that. And the mental images and the emotional states, the mental impressions of all kinds that would form in the mind of a listener when I was playing. I had that in mind a lot. And I got good enough at improvisation. And in more formal creativity of the creative process of coming up with bass lines, but also at improvisational playing to pretty much be able to play whatever came to my mind right on the spot. And I often had strong mental images going on in my own mental sphere, atmosphere, and moods and kind of feelings that I wanted to convey in what I was creating on the spot. And I often found, once I got pretty good at being able to just play whatever came to my mind, not just note sequences, folks, but moods, mental images, thoughts, all conveyed through the sounds and its different aspects. The timbre, the tone, the pitches, the nuances of playing. I wanted to convey whatever it was that was on my mind into the mind of the listener. And I often found when people would sit and listen to me play, And when I would get done with maybe a 10 or a 15-minute improvisational composition, they would report to me what was on their mind while listening to the evolution of this composition from a beginning through evolvements of the composition as it was coming up to the end. And in almost all cases, it would be exactly what it was I'd had in mind. A person might say, well, I pictured myself underwater, swimming underwater, surrounded by whales, and then I came upon a big coral structure and saw sunken ships, and then rose out of the water and sailed through space, and I went past Saturn and so forth, and then I felt an urgency to get back home. And I saw this happening. I could see it happening. And it would correspond with what I'd had in mind. Now, exactly how this transference of moods, states of consciousness, mental images took place, I'm not prepared here to go into all the ways in which that can happen, and all that was likely happening at those times. But it did, at least in part, had to do with the sounds. Certainly, my will force was going into the creation of the sounds with certain things in mind, including strong mental imagery and emotional content being put into it. So there was a strong astral component to this, and will force behind it. And that becomes kind of part of the sound, like overlaid into the sound itself. It becomes part of it, and it enters into, is all transferred at various levels, including the sound vibrations, the audible sound vibrations, into an audience's mind. This happens, especially when it's intended to happen, and done by somebody with some level of skill at accomplishing it. I know it. I've experienced it many times. From the creative end of it, the creator's end of it. Now, I had always considered myself that the rock and roll rhythm sounds a little primal, and that's one of the things I liked about it. And one of the, I guess, part of what I liked about it is that it seemed to be very basic, kind of fundamental. Something that's been around for a long time. And I did, for a little while, look into voodoo rhythms, because I wanted to, as a bass player, being kind of the bridge between beat and rhythm. Bass playing, there are many ways to describe it, but bass playing is kind of like being a drummer, but with continuity between the strikes on a drum, between the beats, the parts of the beat, each act of percussion, there's continuity between them, a tone that continues between them, and you can change the pitch, and then of course add nuances. But it's a kind of a combination, the bridge between beat and rhythm. Bass playing is, and good bass playing in rock and roll, at least, one aspect of good bass playing, when in a band or in a musical group, you strike the strings in accordance with the drummer's percussive strikes on the drums. So bass playing has a lot to do with beat, and it has a lot to do with rhythm. Well, I had taken it to be that the basic rhythm of rock and roll, the essential rhythm of rock and roll, it's not carried out in all cases, and it's becoming less and less so over the years, but the original rhythm of rock and roll in 4/4 time was similar to the human heartbeat. Not similar to voodoo rituals. If you don't know this, the rudimentary rhythm in rock and roll can be described as follows. It's 4/4 time. You know, when you write the music, if you write it, a quarter note has one. It's like one beat. One beat in a measure is symbolized by a quarter note. Okay, and there are 4 in a measure. That's 4/4 time. All right. So each measure has 4 beats to it, and each of those 4 beats gets different emphasis. No 2 of them get the same emphasis as the other 3. No one of them gets the same emphasis as the other 3. The strongest emphasis is on the first beat in the measure. The next strongest, the second strongest, the one step down in strength or power of striking the string on a bass, if we're talking about bass, is on the third beat. Third down in order of strength is the second beat, and the weakest emphasis is placed on the fourth beat, so that we get this effect. Boompa boompa, 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 boompa boompa. Strongest beat is on the strongest emphasis is on the first, followed by something a little weaker, followed by something slightly stronger than that second one, and then finally followed by the weakest in the sequence. Kind of sounds like a train, and it sounds like the human heartbeat, the lub-dub of the heartbeat, over and over. And I noticed also, when listening to certain bass players who did this very well, who were very good at this, that the bass seemed to hit me right here in the chest. Not all bass did that. But when it had that breathing effect to it, that breathing, it was hitting me right in the chest, like right where my heart is. It was hitting me in the heart, man. I never considered it to be closely related to voodoo. Although I did notice a certain primalness to the rock and roll beat, to the rock and roll rhythm. I kind of took it to be because it's kind of like the human heartbeat. Something we can all relate to somehow, if we're not ideologically opposed to rock and roll. Now, why would it have an entrancing effect? Why does riding a train, the sound of a train going by, or when you're on the train, have a somewhat entrancing effect? Why does anything have an entrancing effect? Anything auditory? I don't know the full answer. I don't know the full answer. But voodoo rhythms certainly do. They assist in putting people into trance states. rock and roll, the rhythm of it, I think, is initially intended to do the same type of thing. So whether it corresponds with the, has a parallel with the human heartbeat, or voodoo, or anything else, it does have a result. And is that something evil in itself? No. No, it's a function of sound. Sound produces effects. And if a sound can be produced in such a manner as to somewhat hypnotize or entrance, well, it depends on how we're using that. The danger comes in with the case of rock and roll, then what message is being given with this medium? What is the message? And we're now getting into, increasingly, as I've already insinuated here, certain tones with the electronics that are being produced today, some of the solid state stuff. Some of the tones are ice cold sounding, just ice cold sounding. They cause me to shrink back away from it. I turn the stuff. I can't stand the tones. Some of it, some of these guitars that are made these days, and you plug them in, the pickups on them, the electronics involved, and the amplifiers. Some of the amplifiers and the way they change tone, and the end result. The result is a tone and a timbre that causes me to reel backwards and away from it, because it seems to, if I were to enjoy it, I would have to lower my overall frequency of vibration in this universe to tune into that. And I'm not going to do that. And there are sequences of notes that seem to have a sinister sound to them. And when used, along with these tonal icinesses, and then you throw in lyrics that convey a violent message or whatever, and the music, some of it doesn't follow that initial, that basic formula, that rhythmic formula that I told you about. It's just all, bum, 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 no breathing aspect to it, no heartbeat type aspect component to it. It's just all, everything gets the same emphasis. Some of it is very adrenaline raising, nerve-wracking. It leaves people in states of nervous agitation. It removes calmness from the mind, and people actually can get entranced by that too, in a way, and say that it brings them peace of mind, because they don't know the difference. Some of these forms of music, certain speed metal bands, are played by soldiers in combat just before they have to go shoot people, like in tanks. They're in a tank and they're playing with headphones on, certain speed metal songs that have to do with killing people, and it gives them the strength, they say, the strength to just blow people to shit and revel in it. So how does the pretty music affect you? Sound, and I'm not just talking, when I say sound here, right now, I'm not just referring to audible sound. I'm talking about vibration itself. What is vibration? Is it essentially light? Is it essentially sound? What is it? See, vibration and motion are kind of the same thing, and motion is one of the fundamental, essential aspects of the manifest cosmos. Some people call vibration a universal law. Other people just link it up with motion and say that it's not a universal law. It's just one of the fundamental aspects of the cosmos. And it operates in accordance with universal laws. Elsewhere here in this channel, we have said there are three primary aspects of the manifested cosmos: substance, consciousness, and motion. So if we want to link those together, we could say that the manifest cosmos, essentially is substance, conscious substance in motion. But this motion is vibration, and its first manifestation, its first sign of any manifestation, is what is taken in occult thought to be sound, not just audible sound, but sound. That is its first manifestation, its first actualization. Its primary aspect is sound. Vibration is sound vibration. Okay, and then immediately following is the other manifestation or actualization of vibration, and that would be light. That metaphysically, sound is prior to light. Metaphysically. All right. So we're talking about something extremely fundamental here. And you think that it does not have an impact on your astral body and your mental body and your spiritual body, your physical body, is to be deceived or be just naive. It does. And depending on the tones, the timbre, the rhythms, the beats, all things that go into making audible sound, depending on all those things, is the effect produced. So, how does the pretty music affect you? And here's what I'm suggesting. If you have any feeling that any sounds you're listening to in the way of music, are giving you negative thoughts toward people, aggressive emotions, violent thoughts, anger, pumping up your false ego in any way, be careful. Well, unless, of course, that's exactly what you want. But then, if I were to have a suggestion for you, if you're one of those, then it would be to maybe reevaluate at some point what your motives are in life, taking into consideration the long-term picture of cause and effect. Then maybe long after getting a good grip on that, moving on to just maybe what your duty is to universal will and life principle in all things, and the principle of evolution inherent within. If the music you listen to incites within you anger, violence, aggression, any of these kinds of things, or if you can get the feeling that it is causing you to feel extremely passive so that you're receptive to anything, then maybe be careful of that too. Be careful of that too, because whatever else is happening at the moment is then going to enter your mental atmosphere more easily. Be careful of certain of these new age things that supposedly make you feel very tranquil, put you in a hypnotic state. Why do you need that? It can be constructive. It depends on how you're using it. For one thing, if you're using it to just have your mind go blank, well, be careful. Is that really a desired state? It might feel okay. It might feel like a bit of rest. But we've addressed this blank mind concept elsewhere here in my channel. It might not be all the good thing that it's cracked up to be. What else did I want to say here about sound? I would like to learn more about sound. Different frequencies of sound correspond with colors. And as we know, thought forms, one of the essential aspects of thought forms are their colors. Their colors correspond with the quality, vibration, frequency of the thought behind them. Sound frequencies correspond with colors and numbers. So each frequency of sound has a corresponding color and number. And when those combinations are known, they can be used with extreme effect. Especially then when incorporated into other forms of symbolism as well. I would like to learn more about those correspondences. I know some about it. I'd like to learn more. And I suggest that if you investigate such matters very far and you get reliable information about it and you consider employing such knowledge, be very careful how you're using it. Examine closely your motives and the role of your false ego in your usage of that knowledge. All right. I guess that's it for this video. Be well.